it was leading to war, but when he was reading the two Japanese papers, he had an idea where the thing was heading. The thing that I remember most was that he was getting alarmed at the tone of the war news that was coming. So he always said, when he doesn't want war, he never wanted war. But if you're comes to that, he said, remember, you're an American. And he said, if the news gets worse and you have to serve, you're an American, you have to be, that is where you belong. You don't know the Japanese country anything because they couldn't even provide for me. So he says, I expect you, if it does come to war, that you'll serve under this country. So that's what he told us kids, that we're Americans, we have to serve.
Can you tell me where you were living at the time when you heard about Executive Order 9066?
Well, see, it was somewhere middle of March, I think. My folks lived in Mountain View. So it was a Sunday night. We were returning home to San Mateo, and those days you had the radio on the cars. And it was around 12 o'clock. The flash came on the news that we were going to be frozen at where we were at that day. So if you wanted to move, you had to move then, or you'd be frozen where you were. So my wife happened to be pregnant at the time. She wanted to, we were going to be frozen, like I'd be in San Mateo and I can't move out of there. So we decided next morning that if we're going to be frozen, then we better move out of here, because it was her first birth deal, and she wanted to be Ellie's mother to be. So we decided to move out of there that day, and by 6 o'clock we were out of San Mateo and moved to Mountain View.
When did you and your family have to leave Mountain View for the evacuation?
It was sometime in June. All that time we were just frozen. So I had given up work and all that because they weren't definite when we were going to move out. My mother lived in Mountain View. Her folks lived in Mountain View too.
What did you have to do to prepare for the evacuation?
See, there was a lot of a headache those days because they never came out definitely where were we going. So we didn't know what to buy, heavy clothes or summer clothes or whatever. So it was a madhouse. So we bought what we thought we'd be able to bring. Right. And so and with everybody trying to find the same kind of thing in the store, it was hard to find one. There's always somebody ahead of you that have bought it already. So we waited until around, what was it? It was toward the end of June that we moved out of Mountain View.
And you went by train?
Yeah. Well, we went to the station. Somebody brought us to the station.
Did you have to sell all of your possessions?
Well, that's what hurt. Like my wife had a brand new washing machine. She paid over $100 for it. And when we offered it for sale, we got a telephone call saying $5. She only used it once.
That's terrible.
So that's why I worked for a lady that says, I told her the problem we were having, that we have to get rid of our stuff. And she said, well, I've got a basement, it's not so big, but you can put most of your things there. So I was lucky that I worked for this lady. So, but there's a little stuff that, well, like cars and, like I said, washing machines and every other thing. The first time I had an offer for this $100 washing machine, she was talking about $5, because that's what she said for her to have hers repaired. So for $5, she thought she could buy a, because if we didn't get rid of it, we'd have to just leave it there. So that's how it is. It was a bad house.
When did you actually have to report for evacuation?
It was in the latter part of June. See, all this time we had been running around like crazy, not knowing what to buy or what we should do with what we had. The lucky was the Caucasians stored it for them. But like us who were farming, we didn't have Caucasian, so we had to find a place to put it or sell it or just leave it. Oh, the only thing I remember is we started out about 4 o'clock from the station. And about 6 o'clock they began handing out box lunches. And so I was lucky because I loved beef tongue and that kind of stuff. But my father, he didn't believe in eating that kind of meat. So he gave all his meat, a portion to me, and he lived on bread because he couldn't eat that stuff. Because in Japan, they didn't touch that kind of meat. So I had all kinds of lunch I could eat, whereas my father, he's eating bread. Overnight, we got there in the morning around 8 o'clock. See, because we had to stop for every other train that was on the track because we didn't have any priority. So every time the train, like my father, he couldn't sleep because I don't know, or whatever, because every time they come to a halt or start, you get shaken out of your seat. Whereas the regular just glide out and glide in. But this one, they shake you to pieces. So even if you want to sleep, you can't sleep because they shake you up.
Can you tell me what it was like at the Santa Anita Assembly Center?
We got there around 8 o'clock in the morning, I know that. We had our baggage for them to inspect. So we got through around somewhere close to noon.
Did they assign you to a job while you were at Santa Anita?
Well, after we finished our inspection of our baggage that we were bringing in, and they assigned us to a room, and then they called us in and assigned us to different work in the camp. And after all this thing that we had gone through, I wasn't in no mood to be told you got to work here or there. But the trouble was the army would come in, and next day this party, whoever gave his mouthpiece, he wasn't there anymore. That's how they kept everybody in line because you didn't want to get separated from your family. So you just kept your mouth shut and did whatever they told you to do. Because I remember this party was a dentist from I think Salinas, and he was talking about the food that they're getting. Somebody's making money because no matter how they try to tally up the cost of the food that they're giving us, somebody's hijacking a lot of money. Well, next day we wonder where he went because we don't see him. Well, during the day, the Army come and put him on a Jeep and nobody knew where he went. So you have a thing like that. Well, the only thing you have is your family. You're not going to fight them for anything. You just want to stay together. They assigned us to do different work, and like us, we were assigned to a camouflage nets. You know what they are. We got to weave different colored stripes in it. We worked on the ground. They didn't have enough pools to take them off, so we had to work on with the nets on the ground and feed it in. But anyway, we weren't very good workers because we're still griping, you know, have for $6 a month in the hot sun. Santa Anita's hot. So we were just doing what we were supposed to do, not trying to excel or anything. It's just working because if we don't do what they tell us, we don't know where we'll end up. We did, and we finished their contract for them. But at one part, these desks that were hanging across the grandstand, you know, they do this way up in the air. Well, they strung them across there, and then they will bring it down. Then we'd have to weave the stripes in. Well, that particular afternoon, everything seemed to be quiet upstairs because usually they're talking and yelling and it's quiet. So I remember my friend and I was wondering what's happening up there. They're supposed to be weaving those fish nets, and instead they dropped them all down. They're not finished or nothing. They all finished and put the nets down. So we were wondering what's happening. Then the people ahead of us started to walk out. So we thought, what's happening? We better walk out too. So we walked out, and what do you know? Some of the people that were at the commotion were coming back to take care of their apartment because what the people that were returning were saying was that they're inspecting all the apartments, you know, and they're confiscating. Well, the worst thing was they're confiscating baby food even, because see, you didn't know what kind of supplies they're giving you for the kids. So a lot of us bought the baby food to bring in because in case they have to rely on what they have, they'd be stuck. So a lot of what got the crowd mad was that they were confiscating these baby food. And so we thought that's a limit to what they should do to us, you know. So they finally got big and they stopped. So everybody stopped working on this that day because there's no excuse for them to take baby food away even. See, that was it was a riot, but it never got in the papers. The trouble is my wife was in her, I forget what it was, middle of the 9th month or whatever. She had been housed at the hospital, in Los Angeles Hospital, Marengo House, and there was about 20 pregnant girls who were in shape to be moved, so they stayed back. When I left, I was on the next to the last train out of Santa Anita for Santa. So she couldn't travel, so I had traveled myself. Like I said, it took us a long, long time because, like I said, the train would stop every so often if it was an oncoming train, you know. So anyway, we got there around 11 or 12 o'clock in the night. I remember when the train stopped at the station in Utah and parked the car to load water and coal, because that would run out of coal. And when that train stopped there and said anybody who wants to stretch their legs can go outside. So all these young kids, they were whooping and hollering when they got to get outside the train and in snow. They're really snow, throwing snow all around. 10 minutes later, they're all frozen there. They want to come in. You know, they only had California closed. But like, as soon as they cold penetrated there, they're coming in.
When did you arrive at Heart Mountain?
Well, my son was born October 29th. He was born then in Los Angeles. Because when on the 29th of October, I was at this railroad stop in Utah. That's how I remember it.
Do you remember the time of day that you arrived?
We got there on 12 o'clock, I think it was dark. Most of us had persons who were on the previous trains and had been assigned rooms, you know. Well, they called it apartments.
They're more like barracks.
Yeah, barracks.
Army barracks.
Well, the first thing that got us thinking was they classified us from 1A to enemy alien. And that didn't stick well with us. Who were, like I said, like my father was taught us how we should, in case it came to that. Well, anyway, after the war started, in our block there was two young men lost their lives at the beginning. Then we heard rumors that they were trying to form a suicide battalion, you know. And so some of the leaders thought that was the limit, to say you're an enemy alien and put you in a suicide squadron. So they did. See, the trouble was we had no leaders, and nobody wanted to stick our head out when you see people getting shipped out of camp to a super camp. So at the beginning, there wasn't much opposition because we learned how to keep quiet. You just stomach what they give you and just don't say anything. So that's how the camp people ran. I know that's how I ran. I was in no shape to think about anything else because the only thing we had is the clothes on our back. But as time passed, there were some of these who had to guts. And there's two people that got together and they decided to walk out of camp. They said, "What do you know? The sentries with guns pointing at us. They were ready to shoot us." So they came back to camp. And once you hear that story, nobody else tries it because you don't want to get shot because you got a heavy responsibility with your family now.
Were you given the questionnaire about your loyalty to the United States? And do you remember how you thought about answering it?
Well, see, there again, there's two ways to think about it. It wasn't a straightforward question. So what was said is, if the enemy, I answered where if the enemy comes to this country, I would fight. But I wouldn't fight anybody else. That was just my answer. But it didn't mean a thing. It just false motion to get us to sign. See, we weren't into politics. So it was something that were real late in recognizing that there has to be some sort of cohesion, or otherwise we won't get nowhere, because regardless what we do, they've got the upper hand. So anyway, I think it was block 20, these two people lived. They got enough gumption to say, we're not being protected by the Constitution, so we have a right to ask for our rights to be restored. And when everybody's in the same mood but couldn't express it, but now they got somebody to express it, they joined up.
They joined up for the military?
No. For this movement, to have our rights recognized, at least take down the barbed wires and have entry, well, all the stuff that we used to call it Bill of Rights. We wanted it restored concerning our situation, but they didn't care. They just kept ignoring us. They instituted a draft, and there's a few of us that went against their drafting us without restoring our rights. And so, altogether in that group there were 63 who got imprisoned. Altogether there was about 300 some people in all the different camps. See, what happened was when they started the draft, at the beginning, only 1 in 5 responded. The rest held out. And it got to a point where people would not go at that time, but on the next call, they would go. They were afraid to go it alone. If somebody was with them, they'd go. I mean, they would not go. And that kept up for a few days, and I remember this leader saying, "You ever heard of Okamoto?" He's the one that started this whole thing. No, Okamoto. And he got to a point where 5 went, had 1 stayed back, and I can remember him saying, "This is getting to be an exercise in futility. We got all that backing, but when it comes down to backing your word with action, everybody doesn't really believe enough to, So he says, this is going to be an exercise in futility. We had the backing in the crowds, but when it came to actually not going, they broke down. There are some people writing to the English section of the paper, and up until then I had never thought of anything, I just wanted cooperate as much as I could without jeopardizing myself or compromising myself, as I put it that way. Because I really did believe that they were doing us right. But when you were involved in politics, as it were, because the Japanese community was such a small community that we never were taught about being politically minded. In this country, we were just a small minority that they wouldn't even care about. So then I wrote a letter one time. I thought, well, I better at least try something in my own little way. So I wrote a letter to this one party that led the what do you call it, revolution. And I wrote a letter to him because he was recognized as the one that's leading the group. And somehow he read the letter. It was assigned to him anyway, because that's the only person I knew of by name, and who's brave enough to try to get out of camp and get shot. So I had never known who he was or what, but I figured, well, he's the party I should write to. So I wrote him a letter, and what do you know? The letter gets printed in the camp paper. He said, I didn't hope the letter to be printed by them, but evidently it slipped there. So he had the letter published by the paper, camp paper. Then a newspaper reporter by the name of, you ever heard of David Imura? He was a newspaper writer for the Japanese papers in English. Well, he got the letter to this party, and so they somehow the opposition was, I guess they didn't think nothing of it. So he had it published in the Japanese, camp paper, and what do you know? It struck a note in the people, because it was mostly what a person who felt in camp and what was wrong with them, what they were doing to us. And when he had this letter published in the camp paper, their subscription rate doubled and tripled, because I had written as much as how I felt as an individual. And it probably reminded them of their situation, that it's true that we're going through these things, and they don't do anything for us. So anyway, the paper's distribution doubled and tripled. And then all of a sudden, these letters aren't printed anymore. And I always wonder, he's a newspaper writer, he has a right to write what he thinks that is right, And then later on, I heard from others that the government had intervened and said, if you keep on printing these articles, we're going to close you up. So an independent businessman, to lose everything he has when the government shuts him up, he caved in, and he was still allowed to write, but not on this kind of stuff. Well, anyway, things were going from here to there, and people were getting excited. I mean, this letter, I guess, woke a lot of people up. That's why they were getting such a answer to it. And so they, like I say, they had to close up the paper. See, like this riot that they had in camp, it was never, people outside never knew about it. And the people involved in it, a lot of them didn't even know what really happened. They just following the crowd. But anyway, they closed him up, so the only only outlet that we had was closed.